People first organizations will win in the future of work.
Your only real asset is your people.
We all want purpose-driven work.
HR-led organization is.
I'm sorry, but leaders don't lead empty desks and empty shop floors.
Welcome to the People Strategy Leaders Show. I'm your host, Sri Chellappa, founder and president of Engagedly, and a serial entrepreneur in technology, films, and music. This is where we talk to people leaders, business strategists, and organizational savants about leading in the time of change. What is working, what is not working, and more importantly, what we should be thinking about. Stick around to the end of the show. We will reveal how you can be our next guest. And now, let's engage. Hello and welcome to People Strategy Podcast. This is Sri Chellappa, your host. Today, I'm joined with Niki Avraam. Niki Avraam is a legal entrepreneur at the forefront of a refreshing movement in leadership and workplace evolution. With a distinguished background in employment and discrimination law, Niki's career has been marked by litigating a series of high-profile cases and establishing the esteemed Howat Avraam Solicitors. Her approach defies convention, challenging the established norm across various industries. Niki firmly believes that by instilling a sense of ownership in our roles, we become architects of our own careers, steering our organization towards unprecedented success. Well, welcome to the show, Niki. Thank you for joining us all the way from London.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. That's a really strong introduction. Thank you. And this is the stuff that floats my boat. I love to talk about it. So I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah. So you've been obviously a lawyer, but you've also been an entrepreneur, and as such, you work with a lot of people and trying to get them to align to your vision. And one of the things that we were talking about earlier is this ownership culture, which you want to install in people in your organization. What exactly do you mean by ownership culture? Can you set the context there for us?
Sure. I mean, it's certainly not confined to people within my own organization. I founded a law firm 10 years ago with the vision that we would collaborate and do everything that a company needs. I'm an employment and discrimination lawyer by trade. The ownership culture that I'm very much focused on is derived from my own journey, as well as getting into the bones of many businesses that I've advised over the years, and really seeing what are the issues with the workforce? How can we move that forward in a positive way that will also have social impacts beyond our organizations and the individuals within them? So, as a lawyer coming up in the legal world, which is a very conventional world, I mean, it still is, and very precedence-based, I took a very entrepreneurial approach. And part of that was driven by my vision on how employment and discrimination law could affect societal change. But also, part of my motivation was, well, if I can build these departments in larger firms, which took a rejection of some of the traditional roles that were offered to me in commercial law, for instance, then I can work with agency, autonomy, to build these departments for the good of the firm, for the good of the clients, for the good of my colleagues, in collaboration with the organization. And that alignment of my own vision and strengths, alignment with the organization's vision, strengths, and goals was really powerful. And it meant that I was truly engaged in what I was doing, and that I felt that I had a personal stake in the success and the well-being of the firm. And coming from that and looking at the operation of other organizations, I just think it's so important for individuals to have control, agency, autonomy over what they do, over how they achieve the goals, their own goals, those of the organizations, as well as even the architecture of a job role. That should very much be a collaboration between the individual, the organization, how that evolves, how it moves forward. How do they want the role to change and evolve and transition? We need that forward motion. We need it for invigoration. We need it to feel significant. And organizations need that to keep everyone engaged and on board.
Yeah, the ownership culture is actually extremely important, not just from getting the organization to move forward, but it's also important from an employee and a person's own motivation, but also their own self, worth and self progress, if you will, because you spend your best, and I talk about this a lot on my podcast, you spend your best time of your life at work, your younger years, you spend your best times of the day, your daylights at work. And if you don't feel like you're actually doing something that you have some level of agency on, then really you feel like you have no purpose in that role. So it is actually good for the well-being in many ways for the employee, which is why many people are so dissatisfied with their work, with their career. And it's very important, because as a society, like you said, we want to evolve into a species that's not necessarily focused on making money for somebody else and profit motivated, which is important to move the ball forward, but it also needs to take into consideration the human element of all the people working in an organization. How are we doing as a society in that in the last few years?
I think there's been progression, and with everything that's happening with AI, robotics, automation, there is a need for that. And I think there is a recognition for that need because everyone has an appetite for it. It is, as you say, it's crucial for people to feel invigoration and significance from how they work. But also it's incumbent on organizations to cultivate that, to create space, even micro spaces when the processes are tighter. I think more can be done because it's a muscle that needs to be exercised by both individuals and organizations. I evolved a lot as a leader from a kind of top-down leader to one that's an enabler, enabling people, their career progressions, and enabling relationships, onto also leading through inspiration and sharing our journeys.
Mm-hmm.
That top-down leadership, where this is where we need to get to and this is how we do it, can make people feel smaller. And I think that association that some in leadership positions may have with their ego and that difficulty in separating that means that the danger there is that people might feel temporarily invigorated by the journey and inspired by the passion of the leader, but with time, they may get smaller.
Yes.
And
yes.
therefore, that prevents evolution. Agility is so crucial to all of this. And, much of my talk about smashing conventions and going beyond the precedents and not being shackled by what's come before, which is as well from my own experience, is about creating that space for people to move forward. Because if you're bound by the traditions and the precedents, and that acts as a barrier to moving forward, then there is too much of a confinement.
Yeah.
And then an inability to move beyond that.
So can you give me an example of where you actually saw this, where roles were traditional or bound by convention, like you said, and where you saw that change and what impact that had?
I've seen it in a myriad of particularly professional services. So the legal industry is the first. It's so easy to use that as an example because it is, as many people might suspect, a conventional precedence-based industry. Accountancy, financial services, all that is driven by, historically, okay, how have we done it? What are the structures that have gone before? And questioning that and allowing space for innovative leadership mindset thinking means that, we're not just bound by people's experience, by people's authority and the respect for that. It means that we can align all of the technical with all of the other things that go alongside that to enrich the organization and make people feel invigorated. So, for example, when we started our law firm, a law firm that we wanted to operate in a different way, to redefine how clients were serviced, but also to reshape the way people were working. Traditionally, people had looked at the high-level universities, the technical acumen.
Mm-hmm.
We sought to align that and to look at a diversity of people in terms of their professional journeys, in terms of their background, because that means that they can bring so much diversity of thought and experience into the organization. And in order to enable that, you need that agility, and you need not to be bound by everything that's come before. And in so many of these industries, you look at, you speak to the recruiters, I speak to so many over the years, even within the larger organizations I was at. And the question, how much experience, what we sort of called post-qualification experience, and what's the structure and that expectation that it's bound by, what all other law firms do. It doesn't need to operate that. And we can't stay relevant to today's society and economy with that mindset.
Yeah, so coming back to the ownership culture again, how do you get individuals, once you get them in these roles, to see, their roles as personal investments rather than mere responsibility? Because that's when you get the most out of them, right?
Right. That's a great way of looking at it, personal investment, because it goes beyond them being confined to, the organization. So to talk about people's career progressions, what is the training and development that we can assist with? And where do you want your role to go? The trajectory, that traditional upward trajectory is not something that is desired by everyone, and not something that should be imposed on everyone. So where are your strengths? Do you want to focus more on the business development? How do you want to align the technical? Where do you see that going? And it's not with a view to, expecting them to stay with the organization forevermore. If you take a genuine approach to enable people's career progressions, and they see that and they feel that, then there will be that natural alignment. And that's not to say that we all work in silos, We have shared culture in any organization. We have a community, and that's so important, that social connection. But we look at everyone as individuals, and, not have that ignorance to where they want to go and how they might want to change it up. Change is so important in terms of people's career and their progression. That's why job roles need to change. And sometimes that's a sideways change. It doesn't have to be, as I said, the upward trajectory.
Yeah. The one thing we have been talking about in the HR profession, and in general, the people strategy profession, is talent mobility and gigs, internal gigs. I don't know if you've heard that term before, where you might have a specific role in an organization, but that doesn't mean you cannot go and do something else part of your time in a different department or a different function, because it diversifies your day, if you will, and your experience, and also makes it a little bit more fun and challenging for your growth overall. And I think that gives a lot of reason for people to stay, because they're not siloed into this one role that is structured and defined on a piece of paper, and saying, hey, this is my lane, I'm going to stay in my lane, and don't go outside your lane. And I think that's just a wrong way of looking at things, where a lot of organizations are trying to get to that point of looking at the skill-based organizations, which is another term that's been very popular these days.
Yeah.
And that gives that sense of ownership. Like, I can be here to learn and grow, and not just get stuck in this one lane where this is the end all be all of my career, and the only way to go anywhere is to get promoted, but not think about it as the other ways to grow is to learn new skills, contribute in other ways, and make your work a little bit more challenging in a fun sort of a way as well.
Yeah. I mean, you're missing out on so much if you don't look at where people want to go, what are the strengths, what are their preferences. The entrepreneurial mindset that I brought to the legal industry might not sound radical now, but it was not the done thing as a lawyer to go out there and focus on business development, bringing clients in, and to want to align my technical, my lawyering, fighting cases with all of that. But it brought so much, and I've seen it in others that I've worked with. It is so enriching, and it also inspires people to bring what they know from their own lives. I've developed a leadership lesson series, and it's derived from, and it can be derived from everyone's experiences, people that we've been inspired by, places that we've been to. So the first of the leadership lesson series and how it started, my family's from Cyprus, Greek Cypriot. And it just went back to, if I reflected back on my entry into the workforce, how had I looked at it? Well, when we had people round, and this might sound bizarre, marrying the two, but when we had people round to our house on a Sunday, we had an abundance of food, not in an opulent way, but, we wanted to present the best version of our home to everyone that came. And we would sacrifice the bedding if they were going to stay over and sleep on the floor for them to have the best beds in the house. We wanted to present the best version of our home, and we wanted them to feel cherished and truly welcomed. That's about applying the principles of hospitality to work, leadership, culture. And how do you activate that? How do people do that? Well, the only way is if they feel that they have a personal stake in the success and the well-being of the organization, a belonging, and that they're making a real contribution. And then when someone comes to them, they're providing a service, they want them to feel cherished and welcomed, clients, colleagues, everyone. And that is so very important, and we can all do that. So when I've spoken at various universities in the UK to young people that haven't necessarily yet entered into the workforce, they might have done a work experience or a sandwich year. How can they understand an entrepreneurial or a leadership mindset without having occupied a boss position?
Right.
And would they really envisage that when they first enter the workforce? Well, the way that they understand that is to focus on the really sort of the human traits that we can bring in. And we all have that from our own experiences. Leadership lessons can be gleaned from anywhere.
Yes.
And I've taken that from so many places and so many people and so many experiences.
Yeah, and if we talk about the entrepreneurship culture, the one that is not talked about as much is entrepreneurship in the organization, where you act like an entrepreneur inside the organization. You don't always have to go out and start a new business or a new company. In fact, it's a lot harder to do it and less impactful in many cases, because you don't have the access to the resources and the team to make that level of impact. And you may never get there, or you might get there, depending on how successful you are and how much drive you get to get there. But within the organization you're in, you can actually make a lot of impact by taking entrepreneurship experience, because leaders want that. As a leader, you're like, oh my gosh, I finally have people who actually want to take ownership and lead and come up with innovation and take some risks. Because otherwise it's always on the shoulder of the leader to take that risk or take that next leap, because world is changing. You can't just have all the decisions being made at the top, because they don't always know what's going on the ground, because they're sometimes so disconnected from what's going on on the front lines of the work of the organization, interacting with the customers, for example, right? And I think intrapreneurship culture can only happen when you have ownership mindset and in your employees, and that requires the leaders to provide a level of psychological safety as well, where it's okay to fail once in a while, and as long as the failure is not fatal to the organization. And it's okay, and not only okay, it's actually encouraged to take some risks, because without risks there's no innovation. Otherwise it wouldn't be called innovation. Right. And it's so the entrepreneurial journey, exactly as you say, does not have to begin from someone starting a company or someone coming up with a great idea. My entrepreneurial journey started way before my own organization. And in fact, lots of people start businesses, whether it's restaurants or accountancy firms or law firms, and they don't necessarily have that entrepreneurial vision or mindset. They're looking at, okay, how do I do this in a way that just replicates what I've come from and carries on the industry practices. By the same token, just because we're in a conventional industry or in a big organization or in a mid-sized organization doesn't mean we can't switch on that mindset. And agreed, the organization has to do everything possible to create that space and safe space. And it's not so much permission, but have that dialogue and that ease with which people feel that they can
experiment to an extent and innovate and have ideas that are implemented. If they're good ideas, have that space. And however you do that in terms of the daily practices and even the simple things like, the meetings, having regular meetings to talk about just things outside that sphere of your immediate, your daily, all of those little things that enable people to feel belonging, space, safe will benefit any organization.
Yeah, so what are some of I'm sure you're talking to a lot of leaders, a lot of organizations as you consult with them and help them. What are some of the steps a leader can take to make sure they're building this ownership mindset in their organization?
Well, the first thing, as I said, is to resist the urge to be bound by what's come before. And I say that repeatedly because it's so easy to fall into that comfort of, okay, this is how we improve the bottom line. And I know the formula that can be applied. And that means you start to operate and organize your operations and your resources in a way that just doesn't allow that space for people to bring their own and to innovate. So the first thing is to question what's come before. For example, someone that comes in and maybe they've got 2 years experience, and a lot of people will ask, a lot of, particularly those that perhaps haven't been in the workforce for a great deal of time, where should I be by the time I'm at this stage? Or what level do I have to be when I'm this many years? And I always reject that question. Where do you want to be? Because there's no rules that say you can't do this, you can't manage, you can't business develop from day one. So the first thing is to look at what you need to leave behind from some of what's come before. Some of it will be valuable and you need to retain it. This is not to say we put everything in the trash, And the other thing is that, as organizations and leaders, we remain open, have a shared culture and shared goals, but we remain open so that, the lines aren't so confining to individuals. And that means everything. That means in terms of, the evolution of job roles, the architecture of that, how tasks are performed in order to get to a certain end game. All of that needs to be left open. And another thing I really promote in terms of life and work, actually, is that encouragement for people to operate outside their direct comfort zone. I call it preferred discomfort, as in, not wanting to say to everyone, you need to do this when they completely don't want to do it. That is just not them. But, when there's something that people feel potentially thrilled by, they're on the precipice of something, but it is uncomfortable. On the other hand, they know if they go there and they push through it, it will lead to growth and invigoration. And that only happens when people feel that there is space and that they can push a little and they can try a little and they can move to the side a little outside their central role. The encouragement of the training and development and going outside, above, below of their immediate day-to-day, those preferred discomforts are so important. They lead to our growth. They lead to the forward motion. Trying something new that's slightly outside the comfort zone is so important. And we all need to experiment with that.
Yeah, I think the important thing here is to know and feel like the leaders in your organization have got your back, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people, especially when you have gender differences, there are people who are overconfident and will do it, even if they are not capable. Sometimes we confuse confidence with competence. And some people just have so much confidence, not necessarily the right competence, and they'll do it. And some people have the competence, but not the confidence, right? And you want them to try new things because they do have the ability, or at least they can develop that skill if they try. but they are so afraid of being wrong or being shamed or or failing. Some people are just afraid of that, and they need to be assured that, hey, listen, I got your back. You need to try it. Let's try this, because otherwise what will happen is people who are confident but not competent are the ones that eventually move on to the higher roles and more roles of leadership and other places where maybe they are not the best fit. That's not what you actually is desirable for the organization. What's desirable for the organization is people who are moving to because of their abilities and the skills, and not stepping back because they're afraid to take that chance.
Yeah, in law, in my industry, in law, I have a very honed ear in terms of being able to listen to what someone's saying and how they are saying it, because you're absolutely right. There is a barrage of people that will come and talk in a very upfront, confident way. But if you really listen to the level of substance, it may well not always be there, as opposed to someone who perhaps doesn't amplify their voice as much as the other person. But when you really listen to the words that are coming out, it is incredibly valuable, and you see real substance behind what they're saying. And I've become attuned to that, maybe
Yes.
because of the industry I've kind of been brought up in, but also I feel that it's incumbent on me when I'm helping the team. And I've said enable before, but actually one of my favorite words is empower. When we empower people, it means that we are, really, it's that real forceful encouragement. I'm standing behind you. You can do it. You've got the tools, and it's essential for us to provide those tools, so that they can be exercised, and that we help individuals exercise the muscles that they need to in order to move forward and into new roles. It's just it's really incumbent on every leader in every organization to do that. And it doesn't always happen. Imposter syndrome is something that is often used in a negative way, the connotations that you feel like a fraud, that you don't belong. But actually you can flip that. There's so many situations where actually learning how to listen to that voice that says that you can't do it, and speaking louder than that voice, and using that discomfort to come up and do and invigorate and to grow. And I've been in lots of male-dominated environments in particular where I've had to exercise that and get beyond the imposter syndrome, because I do believe that particularly where we are perhaps the only one of something in a room, that feeling of imposter syndrome can be heightened. So we need to become equipped to identify that and to empower people to push forward and to say that, your own story justifies your being here. And that is your blueprint, and your uniqueness and individuality can assist that.
Yeah, I love that your own story justifies you being there, because because you are there, right? And so I love that that mindset. Great. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, Niki. It's been a pleasure. How can people learn more about you and get to know you better?
So I have a website, Niki Avraam. It's just nikiavraam.com. And I would love for the Leadership Lessons series and community to grow with people's own experiences. The Leadership Lessons from the Greek Cypriot Kitchen is replicated in so many ways. Leadership Lessons from Mumbai, where I traveled to address the issue of how we're going to shape the workforce of the future. That was about lessons of resilience. And going beyond the challenges that come before, and the unification that was there to grow and to prosper, and people's energy, the unified energy there that we can exercise and cultivate as leaders. The Leadership Lessons from one of the best pizzerias in Naples was really about balancing innovation with tradition. It's the pizzerias that have been around for generations, and the innovation of creating a new restaurant in New York, new pizza stars, creating a new pizza base, was really about the marriage of both of those things. So it's an encouragement for everyone to share those stories, those leadership lessons, and also a program that I've built around leadership mindset and future workforce is really around those pillars of ownership, culture, and agility over rigidity, and exercising our preferred discomforts, because it is a mindset that we can take into wherever we go, whatever the industry, whatever the profession, we can take that forward and implement that.
Great. Well, thank you, Niki. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you, Sri.
Sri Chellappa here. Thank you so much for listening to the People Strategy Leaders podcast. If you are a successful leader or a people strategist who would like to be on this program, please visit engagedly.com/People Strategy Leaders podcast. If you got something out of this interview, would you share this episode on social media? If you know someone that would be a great guest, tag them on social media to let them know about the show, and include the hashtag People Strategy Leaders. I love seeing your posts and guest suggestions. We are regularly putting out new episodes and content. To make sure you don't miss any episodes, go ahead and subscribe. Your thumbs up, ratings, and reviews go a long way to help promote the show and mean a lot to me and my team. Want to know more? Follow me on LinkedIn and Twitter @Sri Chellappa. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time. And thank you to Patrick Ramsey, sound engineer at Kalinga Production Studios, for recording and mixing this show.